Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Exploring faith and the future. Neil Johnson and Bible teacher Dr. Kameel Majdali.
We have been on a fascinating journey talking about Europe, from its beginnings when Christianity began to shape the culture in Europe, to divisions that have overtaken Europe, and the rise of all sorts of philosophies and different ways of thinking. As we get to the last century, the last 100 or so years, Kameel, two of the biggest historical events in all history were the world wars that happened that we know as the First and Second World Wars. These are significant for Europe. In what way?
Well, first of all, Neil, I'm enjoying this tour around Europe, being the great holiday destination that it is and the heritage that we have, in order to understand modern Europe and the challenges it faces, because Europe's challenges are, by extension, ours as well, even here in Australia. But before the First World War, which began in 1914, much of Europe was under imperial rule, not nation states, empires like Austro-Hungarian, German Reich, Russian Empire, and Ottoman Empire, bearing in mind that some of the Turkish Ottoman Empire occupied parts of Europe. That's the scene prior to the outbreak of the First World War. When the war broke out, please bear in mind, it is the first time in human history we had a world war. Never had we had one before. It is believed by some very credible scholars when Jesus Christ says in Matthew 24:7 about the signs of the times before his second coming, he says, nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. One very respected Hebrew Christian scholar says that phrase is an idiom for world wars. Now, if he's correct, remember, we never had a world war until 1914. But it was a war so compelling that even troops came from as far away as, you know it, Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and India. In other words, our Anzacs, for king and country. They came from the ends of the earth to fight in the European theater. Many of them were just young, very, very young. And I actually was in Albany, WA, recently and saw the bay where many of our Anzacs, 41,000, took sail to go to Europe to fight. I think to them it was like, they're going to go have a polo match or something. And of course, all these thousands, tens of thousands of Australian horses also went for king and country. Nobody realized, perhaps, that this was a world war. Nobody realized it would take 4 blood-filled years. Nobody realized that literally 10 to 15 million people would die, including 60,000 soldiers from the Commonwealth of Australia.
And given that the wars were centred in Europe, what does that say about the history of the world, about the place of Europe, and even including the idea of biblical prophecy and last times?
That's a great question. I've never considered it, but my initial response is Europe is a leader. Europe is the mother continent for the West. So, of course, when there were these radical changes happening in Europe, then, of course, it affects the rest of the world. And bear in mind, globalization, which is a term we think is of the modern period, the free movement of goods, services, people, idea, it actually began in the 19th century, not out of America, but out of Britain and Europe.
Faith and the Future with Neil Johnson and Dr. Kameel Majdali from Teach All Nations. Find articles, videos and podcasts from Dr. Kameel, plus today's and other episodes of Faith and the Future in the Vision app or at vision.org.au.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.